Today marks World AIDS Day, an international day dedicated to raising awareness of the HIV and AIDS epidemic caused by the spread of HIV infections. Since the start of the epidemic back in the 1980s, more than 84 million people have become infected with HIV globally, and over 40 million people have died from AIDS-related illnesses. Our next guest, Mitchell Warren, is the executive director of the AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition, a New York City-based nonprofit that works to accelerate ethical development and delivery of vaccines and other prevention options to populations, vulnerable populations throughout the world. Mitchell, thank you very much for joining us on this important day. You know, we just heard President Biden say that France and the United States has pledged to seek to end AIDS, HIV/AIDS, by 2030. What do you make of that goal? Is that realistic?
It is ambitious, to say the least, but I think it is possible, and certainly with the political and financial commitments from the U.S., from the French, from other countries, it is in our sight. But it's at a pivotal moment where we have to make some really hard decisions as a global community. Do we want to end this epidemic? We have the ability to do it. There is increasing resources, but we've got to deploy them in the right way with equity if we're going to have impact on this epidemic.
You know, Mitchell, it's been 41 years since the onset of the HIV epidemic. I remember it was a terrifying, dark, confusing time. How far have we come? How are we doing at this point?
You know, it's remarkable how much progress has been made, particularly in the last 15 years, although we still see it as a pandemic. Even as we watch the SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19 pandemic, HIV hasn't gone away, but it has become less in our face in many respects. And you're right, when you look back in the history, 20, 30 years ago, an HIV infection was often a seeming death sentence. Now we have tens of millions of people getting life-saving antiretroviral treatment. So they live as long a healthy as life as someone who is not infected with the virus. And we have new prevention options that really do allow us to finally give people a range of options from which to choose. And that's why this is such an exciting and pivotal moment, but why it's so difficult, because if we squander the opportunity, I believe history will judge us very harshly, given that we now stand at the precipice of being able to do the right thing. So we've got to get on and do it.
Well, I want to ask you about that. The reality, obviously, HIV/AIDS doesn't discriminate. Men, women, non-binary people, straight, gay, queer, everyone, really. In 2021, more than 110,000 children died of AIDS-related causes. So here in the United States, it does feel miraculously that in relatively such a short time, such a frightening and devastating disease, you know, has been answered by medicine. Is that true around the world? Why still so many tragic stories? Why so many terrible outcomes?
Well, there are tragic stories around the world, including in the United States, because just as with COVID-19, HIV exposes all the challenges and problems we have in our health systems and with the inequities that plague us. And again, we see that in the COVID-19 response and the inequitable access of COVID vaccines. And we see it in HIV prevention and in HIV treatment. So while we have made huge progress, young Black and brown people in this country, particularly in the South of the United States, as well as gay and transgender individuals, people who use drugs, young women in East and Southern Africa, HIV exposes the fragility and the inequities in our societies. And we've got to close those gaps if we're going to have the impact with the scientific tools we have. And, you know, HIV and COVID, the old saying that history may not repeat itself, but it rhymes a lot. And in both cases, we see the wonders of science that could end pandemics, but don't, because we don't make the political and policy decisions to make those available. And that's where we have the challenge today.
That's a great point. Science, medicine did its job. Now politics really has to catch up, and I certainly hope it does. And thank you for your work in this and for joining us. Mitchell Warren.
Thank you so very much.
Of the AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.